I'll try to blend the talk. I'll say some part in Arabic, some part in English, so the people who speak Arabic will not be bored, and the people who speak English will understand it. Okay? It will be in English mainly, but some part of the poetry, it has to be said in the original language, whether it is Farsi or Arabic. You are most welcome again to the society, and I think we are continuing our program as you see, and we hope our Delmon magazine will be ready within a month or maximum 6 weeks, and you will receive copies. Yeah. Okay. Now, my talk tonight is mainly a way, to be honest with you, from the history of Bahrain or the region. It has nothing to do with the history. It has relation to history in general and use of documents, regardless what sort of documents, written documents, sculpture, artistic paintings, and read through it by a sort of historical view than artistic view. I'm not an artist, so I don't understand really what is basic things in art, but I can tell you that some artistic features, which I'm going to show you here, it has a historical background which can be used as a document. Now, the royal manuscripts are called royal because they were written for kings or sultans or shah or a governor, and that's why they are called royal. So they were not written for ordinary people. They were written for a court. And in Arabic, they are called the munamnamat, which is an example there. Now, in classic Arabic, munamnam means it has an artistic touch. And in the Arabic dictionary, namnam means the sand with the wind design left over it after the wind has passed. You find some waves on the sand, that's nimnim. So munamnama means a book which has pictures which has been designed with artistic feature. So that's what is meant by munamnama or munamnamat. What attracts me to it, to be honest with you, is I acquired some of them. I didn't know what they were myself. And of course, these are reproduction on silk from India. But each one of those has a history behind it. And I started from there on looking through books which has been written about these and tracing the artist, the history, the poetic part. And gradually I learned about them so much that I can share with you some of these informations. As I did, somebody else before me done that, and that was Sadruddin Agha Khan. Now, Sadruddin Agha Khan, who is, of course, the prince of the Ismailites, and if you like to know, the Ismailites are a sect from Shi'ism, which started in the 2nd century of Al-Hijrah. That's when the conflict between the Alawis, the followers of Ali bin Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet, and the Abbasids, who were the rulers of the Muslim empire in Baghdad, they had a conflict. And through that conflict, almost 100 sects were born. One of them was the Ismaili sect, and the Ismaili sect managed, in fact, to establish a state. That's the Fatimid Empire in North Africa and then in Egypt. And another part was in Yemen, As-Salehi dynasty, which had a queen called Arwa. She has a palace. Whoever gone to Yemen, 365 rooms in her palace. Each day in a room she stays. And a third group of the same sect established a state which was called Al-Hashashin, or the assassins in Iran, by the leader Hassan al-Sabah. So Agha Khan, Sadruddin, is a descendant of the sect, and they had two groups, one in Syria, which is the center still, and group in India. He discovered in his ancestors' attics, let's say, or stores, so many manuscripts, designs, paintings, which is related to the sect or to the Sufism. And the famous ones that he found was to a man called Abu Mansur al-Hallaj. Now, Abu Mansur was a man who was put on the cross for his beliefs in the 3rd century of Al-Hijrah, brought down, and 7 years later was brought back. His hands were chopped, his legs were chopped, he was burnt, put on the cross, and thrown in the river. 100 years ago, somebody came back and discovered to us who was Al-Hallaj. And this man was a European who discovered who was Al-Hallaj and introduced him again to us while he lived between us and nobody cared. Can you switch one of the ACs, please? Okay. Same thing about these miniatures. Today, they are all over the world, but we don't have any. In fact, Bayt al-Quran has a few copies. Cairo has a few, Turkey has a few, but they are mainly in Britain, in America, in France, and in Germany. Now, through an artistic piece, you can stimulate so much action into the people, and you can get them into a certain drive to look for more. Sadr al-Din Agha Khan started searching this in 1950s. 125 years before that, an artist called Delacroix in Paris, he painted from the Greek mythology the death of King Sardanapal of Assyria, who committed suicide because he was attacked by the enemies. So he committed a group suicide. Himself, his harems, his horses, his servants, they were all burnt. That painting was shown in a salon in Paris. It had stimulated a love for Oriental history and Oriental archaeology. Because of that painting, we had people like Fallow, Botha, and Simpson coming to Iraq and looking in Khurusabad, in Nineveh, in Nimrud, for the reality behind this painting. Don't be surprised, they found a room which Sardanapal burnt himself and his harems and his horses in. Unfortunately, the Sultan of Turkey gave permission to Simpson, Botha, and Fallow, and the others to take the rocks or the sculptures of the pagan period in Arabia outside the Muslim land. And a Farman was produced, and this Farman was produced in 1825 by Sultan Mahmud II. Through this Farman, today the museums in Germany, France, and Britain, everywhere has so many artifacts, so many sculptures, so many archaeological belongings of this part of the world, mainly of Mesopotamia. However, I know it was a sad Farman, but I think they were kept for us to look at them again. Perhaps they could have been destroyed if it stayed where they were. So, what happened then, and why we are talking about these miniatures? In the 1st century of Islam, when the Arab moved up north, of course the Arab moved before Islam up north. When Ma'rib Dam exploded, there were so many immigrations up north. But when I'm talking about the Islam religion as a drive to the Arabs who moved from the peninsula up north, they came in contact with two empires. One is the Persian Empire, and one is the Byzantine Empire. There were Arabs before there, the Ghassanid Arab and the Nádrة Arab, they called them, and they were both Christian Arabs. Through this civilized contact, I call it in the beginning, there were sort of transfer of knowledge and information. Now from the Byzantine Empire, medicine, science, philosophy, and astrology. From the Persian, mythology, art, architect, and sculptures. From India, mathematics, astrology, science, and medicine. All this poured into the new empire, into the Islamic empire. Houses were created, libraries were set, special palaces were erected for people to translate, from the original language of the manuscript, whether it is in Hindu, in Coptic, in Syrianic, into Arabic. So the Arabian library or the Muslim library became so rich with information, mainly transformed, but later on added to it what they found themselves by studying these articles. The same information that was transferred over 300 years became the nucleus for a new transformed Greek science, Hindu science, Persian science to Europe through Toledo. When the Iberian Peninsula fell back to the Christian kingdoms, Toledo's library, which contained a lot of copies of these manuscripts, was translated by the Jews back again to Latin. So it has been given to the East and was given back to the West. The best example for this artistic intermarriage was drawing, architect, and design from Persia, which can be seen until today in some of the building or architectural monuments, even in the Iberian Peninsula or in Spain. However, all the people, whether in the Byzantine Old Empire or the Persian Empire, they converted to Islam. They also had to speak Arabic. They had to translate also into Arabic. But their deep inside nationalistic feeling never died. It was always there. And it was waiting for a moment to come back, to pick up again what was lost for almost 400 years. And that's natural, of course. Now you see the Soviet Union going back all to its natural, original communities. In fact, the people who converted to Islam spoke Arabic and wrote in Arabic. If they did confess in a way or another, whether writing or painting or speaking, that they still have deep-seated feeling for their origin or their own belief, their end was death. The best example we have is Abu Abdullah روزبة ابن دذوي المشهور بابن المقفع, who was born in 106 of Al-Hijrah, that is 724 AD, in Fayruzabad, which is part of Persia. And because of the miniature drawings in his book, he was condemned that he is a kafir or infidel. In fact, Ibn al-Muqaffa was one of the best writers of the first century of Islam, or the second century of Islam, and he is a man who has added so much to the Arabian Muslim library. However, his end was he was cut into small pieces and thrown into the fire. Funny enough, whoever came with a different idea to the existing rule or the dynasty or the thinking, be it a philosopher, an artist, or a poet, faced almost the same end. Whether he was dismissed, or his work was torn and burned, or he was killed occasionally. That's why, though we have so many rich manuscripts, so many rich writings, so many rich documents, it remains that a European comes and discovers this for us. Most of those documents that I have are copies from prints made in Leiden, and not in Cairo, not in Damascus, not in Baghdad. Most of those manuscripts do exist now in museums in Europe and America, and not in our own. If we had picked up what was in these documents, which was a product of so many nationalities, so many way of thinking, so many intelligent people, we would have been today far better in the way we handle the situations and facing the West, developed West, and we don't know how to answer the question, how do we go about it? Where do we fit now? That momentum, which was in the 3rd century of Al-Hijrah, was lost because some of these people, they adopted a Greek way or methodology of thinking. They translated that to a local So they had so much reaction with the ruling house or with the general thinking that they were condemned. Some of them were refused even a Muslim burial. Rashid al-Din al-Hamadani, who came later, and he was a historian in Iran in the Mughal period, he was accused being a Jew while he was a Muslim. And he was buried in a Muslim burial ground, but he was dug up and buried in a Jewish cemetery. Bayruni was an astrologer, and he was a very famous astrologer. He was also accused of being infidel. Still, though all this happened to Ibn Rushd and Al-Farabi and so many others, their work has survived. And we are discovering it now, 11 centuries later. On the Persian side, documentation with an artistic views or paintings, it was a common, it was an accepted. Because in the Zoroastrian belief, documentation was enclosed with the script. And it was in fact made on a 12,000 pieces of goat skin, which had writing and paintings as a document for the believers to follow. As our documents were destroyed, the Zoroastrian documents in Iran also was destroyed when the Achaemenian Empire fell to Alexander in 526, 485 AD, and was destroyed by the invading army. Very few was left, which was called the Kana, and this is in fact what is left from the Zoroastrian original documents. However, after Zoroaster, Mane in Iran has come, and that was around 215 and 276 AD, and his message to the people was through art. By drawing, he can document to the people what he's talking about. Now, the painting which is going to be discussed tonight in this talk, it only served as a touchstone to specific moments and places in the history of the Islamic Empire in general, Iran, Turkey, and India. And I stress, I'm talking only about the royal manuscript, because when I spoke about this in Arabic, some people were not happy. They said, you are saying these are Iranian manuscripts. I'm not saying they're Iranian. I'm saying the royal manuscript linked to a king or an emperor, and in that case, it was documented only through these areas, Iran, India, and Turkey, or Turkey. The earliest works presented here, they were produced for anonymous patterns in the 14th century Iran and demonstrate how Persian artists adapted the practice of manuscript illustrations, and the most important is the national epic Shahnama of the Ferdowsi, or the Book of Kings. Although the tradition of illustrating scientific manuscripts and books of fables had flourished at the Arab courts of the Middle East, essentially as an outgrowth of Byzantine tradition, as I said. The evidence for unbroken chain of illustrated manuscripts in Iran from pre-Islamic, that is the pre-7th century, to the Ali Khanate period, that's the 13th, 14th century times, is elusive at best. Nonetheless, the legend of Mane, the greatest painter of Persian antiquity, survived to furnish an archetypal standard against the later artists could be measured. So it was original school, it was linked to religion. In the late 14th century and early 15th century, political control in Iran passed to the Taimur, what's Taimur-Lank or Tamerlane as they call it, and his heirs, the Taimurids, and the capital moved from Tabriz in the west to Samarkand and Herat in the east. The production of deluxe books and the process of creating designs for a whole range of utilitarian objects became centralized to a greater extent than previously in workshops connected to the courts of the Taimurid Sultan and their sons. Now from the Taimurids, it went to the Jalayirids, the Mudaffaris, the Kurd dynasty, the Safawi dynasty, the Qajari dynasty, and during the Safavid period it transferred to India and the Mughal Empire, and then from Iran to Turkey to the sultans, and it became sort of a unique art linked to the courts wherever they are, and it moves, the art and the artist moves with the dynasty or with the ruler wherever he is. Until the 15th century, that's in 1501, a new dynasty, which was the Safavid, came to power in Iran, and their first king was Shah Ismail. Now during this dynasty, 1602, Persia took over Bahrain. And that was in a struggle against the Portuguese presence in the Gulf. The Portuguese were in Hormuz, threatening the seafarer or the commerce, the Persian commerce through the sea, and monopolizing it. So Shah Abbas, in order to put force on the Portuguese to listen to him or to come for negotiation, he sent his army to take over Bahrain in 1602, to have it as a sort of a paper in his hand for these negotiations. However, in 1622, in a British-Persian pact, they were able to destroy the Portuguese presence in the Gulf and take over Hormuz to the Persian side. When Shah Ismail succeeded, he reunited the eastern and western halves of Iran, which was divided. Thus, Taymurid Herat fell to the Safavid, who had established the capital back in Tabriz. In addition to political domination, the Safavid imposed a Shiite Islam. So Iran became Shiite during the Safavid period, which started with Sheikh Safiuddin and then Shah Ismail, who was called Shah of Qazilbash, or Shah of Kolasar Khan, or Shah of the red hats, because his followers, they were wearing a woolen red hats. In addition to political domination of the Safavid, imposed Shiite Islam as the state religion, thereby distinguishing their regime from those of their rivals, which is the Ottoman Empire. Politically speaking, why Iran became Shiite? The Sultan in Istanbul claims he is the leader of the faithfuls, the Muslims. Iran is a big nation. It has a big borders with Turkey. It has its own nationalistic feeling. It has its own language. It has its own back history. It has its own mythology. They don't want to belong to Turkey. They had all the history through history conflicts. So the Sultan in Turkey becomes the leader of the faithful Sunnis. And the Shah in Persia became the leader of the faithful Shiites. And then they cannot unite. They have to be different. Interesting enough, when Iran converted to Shiite, they needed teachers, clerics, mullahs. Bahrain was one of the places which supplied them with the mullahs. In 1501, Jabal Amil in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, supplied them with the other mullahs. And people don't know why Hezbollah today is supported by Iran, though it is in Lebanon. And why the mullahs, in the pictures, they look Iranian mullahs in Iran and Beirut. It is this, from 1501. That's the history. That's how it happened. Now, one of the Shahs of the Safawi dynasty, Shah Tahmasab, that was the son of Shah Ismail, he was himself an artist. He learned how to paint, to make his own brush from the squares and kittens. He learned how to mix his dye and paint and produce paintings. Now, because he was interested, he invited all the artists, poets, calligraphers, bookmakers to his court. And in Shah Tahmasab court, another Shahnama was produced, and that was a Shahnama made for the Turkish Sultan by Shah Tahmasab court. It is a copy of the original Ferdowsi Shahnama, which was made for Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni in Herat, in Afghanistan. When Humayun was exiled back to India, he settled in Delhi, not in New Delhi. New Delhi was established by the British in the beginning of the century when they moved from Calcutta. And with him, he took the artist, from Iran, because Shah Tahmasp in the end, he lost interest in art, he lost interest in artists, and those artists, they live only in imperial courts. So they moved back to Delhi, and Delhi became a place and a center for this type of art. When Humayun went back, he took with him all these artists, and from there on, this artistic miniature paintings started showing an Indian effect, an Indian background, an Indian atmosphere, Indian flora, Indian birds, Indian clothes. And now we have a Mughal miniature paintings, and we had before Persian paintings. In the 16th century, as you know, the British entered India. An East India Company was established, and they had to have an ambassador and court of Humayun in Delhi. With that, the art of the miniatures started getting a European touch. And then to suit the new customers, the newcomers, it started changing from a miniature art to a European style painting, oil painting on canvas. And gradually and slowly, it became a figure, a government official, or an ordinary painting of a flower or a bird just to suit the European customer. And the art of the miniature painting was lost. Today, what is left is only few pieces of the Shahnamas torn to be sold in markets and in auctions. There is no complete Shahnama existing today. Those pieces were sold in auction or privately, and they exist in Metropolitan Museum in Germany, in Britain, in the museum in London, very few in Topkapı Saray in Turkey, a few here in Beit al-Quran. But a complete picture does not exist. I tried to cover the historical background of how these paintings were born. The artist says these paintings have 3 dimensions. What I saw are 3 different dimensions. I saw a historical dimension that I tried to mention to you, or in short, an artistic dimension, that's the structure and the content, and then a cultural or poetic dimension, which usually the script in the picture tells us, as we will see through the slides. So can we switch, please, the slide? I spoke in the beginning about the painting of Delacroix in 1828, which stimulated the feeling and the love for the art and history and archaeology of the East. This is the painting. This is King Sard in Nepal, his harems, his servants, his horses. They were all burned in a suicide or group suicide because the enemy was approaching Nainawa, his capital. So he decided to take his own life. And that was the end of the Assyrian Empire. I would like to stimulate your feeling, your love to the miniature art by the same way I hope that Delacroix did to his own people, and he sent them to the Mediterranean in the 18th century. We said Manet demonstrated the religion of the Manian religion, which has 2 things really, the bright side and the dark side, or the evil spirit and the good spirit, or the light and the dark, through painting. Now Manet was preaching his belief in Iran, and for a reason or other he was kicked out. This shows Manet in his way to China, spreading his religion. Manet was tortured even in the way to China. He was thirsty, and everywhere he went there was a piece of marble which shines like a pool or a pond. He runs to it and there is no water. So he started painting dead dogs on these pieces of marbles, so anybody else will not be fooled by the same mirage. Now this is from Al-Ferdowsi manuscript, and it is from the Persian mythology of King Al-Zahhak, or in Arabic Al-Dhahhak. Al-Dhahhak was a prince who was guided by the evil spirit to kill his father in a promise that he will become a king. But when he did that, suddenly 2 dragons or snakes grew on his shoulder. And those snakes would survive on the brain of a human being. So every day they had to kill 2 people to feed the snakes on Dhahhak's shoulders. And he spread terror in Iran in the mythology until Faraydun, the legendary king of Iran, caught him, and that's Faraydun with his bull-headed mace, and imprisoned him in a cave. Now, that miniature that I showed you was from the Shahnama of Al-Ferdowsi. That's Al-Ferdowsi here, and another manuscript. And since we have Al-Ferdowsi, I have to tell you who is Al-Ferdowsi. Al-Ferdowsi was one of the most famous poets of reborn Iran after the fall of the Abbasi Empire. During that period, Iran had to speak Arabic, write in Arabic, correspond in Arabic. With the fall of the dynasty, the nationalistic feeling of Iran was reborn through the Shahnama of Al-Ferdowsi, who wrote 30,000 lines in poetry for Shah Mahmud of Ghazni. Shah Mahmud of Ghazni was a king in Herat in Afghanistan, and he promised Al-Ferdowsi for each line a piece of gold. When Ferdowsi finished, there were 30,000 lines. It means the size of an elephant of gold to be given to Al-Ferdowsi. Ferdowsi didn't want the gold for himself. He wanted to build a dam in Tus in Khorasan to protect his people or his native people from floods. The minister or the chief minister in the palace decided to give Ferdowsi silver instead of gold, and Ferdowsi refused to take that. And he migrated to Baghdad, and what was left from the Abbasi Empire, he started writing for them in Arabic to please them. However, Ferdowsi died without receiving his gift, and no dam was built. But Nasr Khosrow, the traveler who came to Bahrain 1,000 years ago, he came to this island, wrote that he was in Khorasan and he saw a building built by Shah Mahmud in the name of Al-Ferdowsi as a gift for the dead poet. Now Ferdowsi, in his way to the court of Shah Mahmud, he met with the poets, the famous poets of the time. And he has taken a corner and they were saying their poetry. Every time they stopped, he completed. And through that, and through his ability to do that, he was introduced to Shah Mahmud's court, and he became the main poet of Shah Mahmud. Some of his poetry, after Shah Mahmud denied to give him the gift, he started attacking Shah Mahmud. So what he says, in Mahmud, who shall hope to find one virtue to redeem his mind, a mind no generous transports fill, to truth to fail, to justice chill. Son of a slave, his diadem, in vain may glow with many a gem. Exalted high in power and place, outbursts the meanness of his race. Take of some bitter tree a shoot, in Eden's garden plant the root. Let water from the eternal spring, amidst the boughs their incense fling. Though bathed and showered with honey dew, its native baseness springs to view. After a long care and anxious skill, the fruit it bears is bitter still. That was against Shah Mahmud. The beginning, the painting that I showed you before of Faraydun, he says about Faraydun in his mythology, It was Faraydun by heaven ordained, who first the world from vice restrained. Great Faraydun, the blessed and wise, was yet no child of paradise. It is a legendary king called Faraydun, and he mentions his name, and part of that poetry that he made, it has the picture of Faraydun. Now, when Ferdowsi went to Iraq, to the remnants of the Abbasi dynasty, they were not interested in the Shahnama. Shahnama is a Persian mythology. It is made for the Persian kings, for the Persian people. So he wrote Yusuf and Zulaykha. Yusuf is son of Jacob, who was employed in the palace of the Pharaoh in Egypt. And when we were small, we were told the cuts in our hand are made by our great-grandmothers. They were cutting apples when Yusuf walked in, and because of his beauty, they cut through the apple in their palms without feeling, because they were taken by the beauty of Yusuf or Joseph. And it depends how your grandmother was caught by that love, how many cuts you have in your hand. Of course, it has no relation, but that's the way it was put to us. When Ferdowsi died, he was also accused of being infidel, and he was not allowed, or his relatives were not allowed to bury him in a Muslim graveyard. So he was buried in his own garden in Tus in Khurasan. He wrote in Persian because his spirit was Persian, because he said that through the Persian language I'm bringing back the Persian feeling. And at that time there were 4 spoken languages: the Pahlawi, which was the language of the kings; the Daris or Durris, they call them in Arabic, the language of the gate man; the Khuzi, the language of Khuzestan; and the Syrianic language, which came from the Iraq and Syrian part. But he writes in Arabic, and he says, بُتْنَا ضَجِيعَيْنِ فِي ثَوْبٍ هَوَى وَتُقَى يَلُفُّنَا الشَّوْقُ مِنْ فَرْعٍ إِلَى قَدَمِ وبيننا عفة بايعتها بيدي على الوفاء بها والرعي للذمم وأكتم الصبح عنها وهي غافلة حتى تكلم عصفور على علمي. That's his Arabic poetry. This is the Shahnama, which was made by Shah Tahmasp to Sultan Salim II of Turkey. Since 1995, it is in the Metropolitan Museum in America. Ferdowsi was not the only one in Sultan Mahmud's court. There was another poet, Abu al-Qasim Abu al-Hasan bin Ahmad al-Unsuri. And the year 1988, 1030 AD. He was a son of a merchant from Balkh, and he was called the king of the poets. He has poetry in Persian and in Arabic. And while Ferdowsi said bad things about Shah Mahmud, Al-Unsuri said good things about Shah Mahmud. But however, he says, look at the buildings which were built by Shah Mahmud. Tell me which one of them exists while my poetry still exists. With Unsuri, there was another philosopher, mathematician, astrologist, a doctor of medicine, a writer, and a poet. He was Abu al-Fath Umar bin Ibrahim al-Khayyami al-Nishaburi. And that is Umar al-Khayyam, which Fitzgerald brought to us through translating his poetry to English. He was in the period of the King Malik Shah, the Sulgar, in 1072, 1092 AD. Again, you see his paintings a lot in the miniature paintings, in the documents or the museums, and you buy them books in the market. And in fact, people know Khayyam more than Ferdowsi, more than Sa'di, more than Hafid, because of Fitzgerald. Some of his poetry says, yesterday, this day, madness did prepare, tomorrow's silence, triumph or despair. Drink, for you not know whence you come nor why. Drink, for you know not why you go nor where. And he says, alike for those, these are all Fitzgerald's translations, alike for those who for today prepare, and those that after a tomorrow stare. A muazzin, a man calling for prayer, from the tower of darkness cries, fools, your reward is neither here nor there. Fitzgerald says he wished he was able to speak English as good as Omar Khayyam spoke Persian. He was so much taken by this poetry that he tried his best to give the proper translation. For the people who speak Arabic, Khayyam says, إن الذين ترحلوا من قبلنا نزلوا بأجداث القبور وناموا اشرب وخذ هذه الحقيقة من فمي كل الذي قالوا لنا أوهام. And he says also, فكرت في الدين أقوام كما حار بين الشك والقطع فريق فإذا الهاتف يدعوهم أيا بله لا هذا ولا ذاك الطريق, which I said already in English. Now, while those miniature arts tells us about poetry, kings, palace and courts, it also tells us about disaster. Here we have a painting of Al-Musta'sim when Baghdad fell to the Mughal invasion. This is Al-Musta'sim standing at the doorway of Kulwad. Baghdad has so many doorways. This is the Kulwad doorway. The dynasty has reached to so much disruption, corruption, that the day that Mughal invaded Baghdad, there was nobody to defend it. Al-Musta'sim opened his treasures and gave them the money and the gold, hoping that they will go. It is estimated that 1 million people were killed at that invasion. Most of them poets, artists, doctors, astrologists, as well as Al-Musta'sim himself was killed and his son. And that was the end of the Arabian Empire, and that was the end of anything called Islamic Empire. And this was on the 27th of January, 1258. This is called Two Lovers. And Two Lovers is a painting which is done by Sultan Mahmud al-Iraqi, one of the artists, famous artists. Two lovers on a picnic, they have their own band, their own servant, they're enjoying the nature. This was part of poetry written by another famous poet of the 8th century, and he was Shamsuddin Muhammad, who was known by Khawaja Hafid al-Shirazi, the translator of secrets, or the carrier of secrets, or the teller of secrets. He read the Quran by heart, and that's why called Hafid. Hafid means he knows things by heart. He had his own philosophy, his own poetry, his own passion poems, and beside writing in Farsi, he also wrote in Arabic. Hafid has diwan called Diwan Hafid, big book, and you can see him also on some of the Persian carpets. They call it the Hafid school. Beautiful girl sitting there and he's teaching them. He says, how blessed am I around me swelling, the notes of melody arise. I hold the cup with juice excelling and gaze upon thy radiant eyes. O Hafiz, never waste thy hours without the cup, the lute and love, for it is the sweetest time of flowers, and none these moments shall reprove. The nightingales around thee sing, it is joyous feast of spring. Hafiz al-Shirazi also wrote in Arabic. And in fact, I found it one of the best written by a Persian poets into Arabic. Listen what he says in Arabic. ألم يأن للأحباب أن يترحموا وللناقضين العهد أن يتندموا ألم يأتهم أنباء من بات بعدهم وفي قلبه نار الأسى تتضرم. ويقول فارسي and Arabic, he mix. سليمة منذ أن حلت بالعراق ألاقي من نواها ما ألاقي ألا آي صاروان محمل دوست إلى ركبانكم طال اشتياقي. He is also a man who has given Bukhara and Samarkand to a beautiful girl who passed through the street in Shiraz. And when Timur-Lenk invaded Iran, he came to Shiraz and he quote Hafiz. He said, you have given my capital and my cities to your beloved girlfriend. He said, well, my lord, because I have given all the time, I'm a poor man, so I have nothing to give anybody else. He was released. However, when he died, again he was accused of being infidel. And they were in between burying him in Muslim cemetery or throwing him for the dogs. They opened his book and it says, قدم دریغ مدار از جنازه حافظ که اگرچه غرق گناه است میرود به بهشت. Please don't stop walking through the funeral of Hafiz al-Shirazi. Regardless what sinful man he is, he's going to heaven. So they buried him in a Muslim cemetery. Of course, the famous one is اگر آن ترک شیرازی به دست آرد دل ما را به خال هندوش بخشم سمرقند و بخارا. I give that beautiful Turkish girl who has beauty spot on her cheek, Samarkand and Bukhara. Okay. One more in Arabic. He says خده الخمري يبدو بعد كأس قد حساها مثل لون الأرغوان فوق نسرين غريب وغريب كيف يبدو ذلك الخط نحيلا وجميلا وهو لا يبدو على الرسم غريب. A man is capable so much to bring his emotion through a different language. He is really a gifted man. We proceed. Now Hafiz Shirazi wrote in passion, and also he was criticizing the mullahs. He's showing here mullahs in the mosque. He says they all speak up, but in reality they never tell you the truth. They have double personalities. This is a mullah caught in the mosque with a ghulam, with a boy, and he has written a big piece about that. Now poetry was written for praise, mythology, passion, war, and love. This is from Arabic mythology. This is Qais ibn al-Mulawwah. Qais is a lover of Layla, and in those days, if a lover writes a poetry or says a poetry about his beloved, the family denies him marrying her. So Qais wrote praising Layla or beauty of Layla. Her family refused that he marries her, so he ended up in the wilderness with the animals. This part of Arabic passion poetry was translated into Persian. The famous man who did that was Al-Hatifi. And of course, Al-Kanjawi did that also, and Al-Ferdowsi, and Al-Ahwazi, and Nidami, and Bakhtiyari. They all did that because it's a passion. Passion attracts all nationalities. Everybody likes passion poetry. In this one, Qais says to the Ghazal, أيا شبه ليلى لا تخافين إني لك اليوم من وحشية لصديق فعيناك عيناها وجيدك جيدها ولكن عظم الساق منك رقيق. I see Layla's eye in your eye. I see Layla's neck in your neck. Only your leg is different. You see, Qais, he lost his weight. He is really suffering. Okay, and the wise man trying to advise him, but Qais refused. Now, since we said in Arabic, we better say it in English. What Hatifi said about Qais. He says, how can I live where thou art not? That's Layla. In dreams I trace thy image still. I see thee and curse my lot. I wake and all is chill. The desert faithless waters spread a snare to lure me on. My thirsty soul is vainly led. I stoop, the wave is gone. The fevered thoughts that on me prey, death seas alone can sweep away. I found the bird of paradise that long I sought with care. Fate snatched it from my longing eyes. I held despair. Wail, Layla, wail our fortunes crossed. Weep, Majnoon, weep forever lost. And Majnoon, of course, died in the desert, and he was buried in the desert. And there are a lot of poetries written about Al-Majnoon. This is again Qais visiting Layla's camp. That's Layla, that's Qais, and it is that one that you have there. It's the same one. Now, passion, this is again Qais in Layla's camp. Qais trying his father to speak to the uncle that he would like to marry Layla who's here. But the father, as I said, because Qais said he made so much propaganda about himself and Layla, he was denied the marriage. Again, Qais brought in chain by an old woman to the camp, but there is no hope of Layla's family agreeing to his marriage. And there is Layla there. And of course, the Arab poetry is full of stories like this of love and passion. As we have passion stories and love stories on Arab side, we have it also on the Persian side. Now, this is the story of Shireen. And Shireen is a princess from Armenia. Her friend Shapur describes for her his friend, son of King Khosrow. She falls in love with Khosrow, and she takes her horse, which was called Shabdiz, and she gallops to Taisafun, or the Madain, which was the capital of the Armenians, for 7 nights and 7 days without stop, to meet Khosrow. She rests in the way, and to have a small watch, he passed by, he doesn't know that this was Shireen, and the story goes on. In another part of Khosrow and Shireen, it says that Shireen was married, and Farhad, who was a sculpture man who make sculpture stuff, was requested by the king to bring the milk channel to Shireen's palace. Because Shireen, whatever asked her husband did it. So Farhad starts working through the mountain, making the channels which will bring the milk to Shireen's palace. And there is an area called Qasr Shireen in Iran. Qasr Shireen is Shireen villa. It is carved rooms and channels and monuments through stones, and it's related to this mythology. Shireen goes to inspect the site, and she falls in love with Farhad. And Farhad, because he loves Shireen, he starts working hard. So what he says, on lofty Besitoon, the lingering sun, looks down on ceaseless labors long begun. That's for hard working. The mountains tremble to the echoing sound of falling rocks that from her sides rebound. Each day, all respite, all repose denied. No truce, no pause, the thundering strokes are piled. The mist of night around her summit calls, but still Farhad, the lover artist, toils. And still the flashes of his axe between, he sighs to every wind, alas, Shireen. Alas, Shireen, my task is well nigh done, the goal in view for which I strive alone. Love grants me powers that nature might deny. And whatsoever my doom the world shall tell, thy love gave to immortality. Her name he loved so fatally, so well. Farhad dies at the site. He falls down and he dies at the site in love of Shireen. Anyway, I think, do you want us to proceed or want to stop? This is another love story. This is called Gulandam and the Lover. That's Gulandam, and that's the lover. Now, in order to show how he loves her, he takes off his clothes in winter and he sits in a cold spring. So he tried to get her emotion and feeling. This is part of the manuscript with the poetry or poems from the Kanjawi, Nidami al-Kanjawi. The ladies behind is Julbai and Julnam, or Gulbai and Gulnam, and she is Gulandam. When Ferdowsi finished his artwork and his poetry to Shah Mahmud or Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, he had to be put for a test. That's the
secret
Sultan
to a healthy
Mahmud.
glow? New Glow and Lovely with
They are
vitamins
the
B3,
judges,
C,
and
and E.
Ferdowsi is reading his poetry to Shah Mahmud. That's one of the paintings. Again, as I said, it's written to history, related to history and poetry. In this one, it is again from the Shahnama of the Ferdowsi. Faraydun, the fifth Shah of Iran, sends his minister Jandal, okay, looking for wives for the three sons of Faraydun in Yemen. Now, history does mention that the Achaemenians, they did rule Yemen and the eastern coast of Arabia and Oman. And these are the three daughters of the king of Yemen. It was not accepted in the beginning when the minister himself went, but in the end they had to bring the three boys with them and the girls accepted the marriage. As we said, these documents or the miniature paintings tells us a lot of things, not only history and art and poetry, but also tells us about social event. This is a punishment of a bad Muslim. Most of you know about Harun al-Rashid and his minister, the Barmakids. Barmakids were from Persia. They were the main ministers of Harun al-Rashid, who became very jealous of their wealth, of them being famous, of them being in control, and he killed them. And it's in the Arab history, it's called the massacre of the Barmakids or Madbahat al-Baramika. This is from the history. This is Ja'far Barmaki talking to Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik had taken a loan from the state, and Ja'far Barmaki, in fact, saying to him, we don't want the money, you can take it and we'll give you more if you wish. Again, Ja'far Barmaki talking to his son, saying to him that if you become the minister to the next king, this is your palace. So as I said, it is also a historical document. Gradually, the miniature art starts changing. This is the Safavid period, 1663, 1664, and it was for Shah Abbas and the Mughal ambassador in Isfahan, and it is showing a meeting And if you notice, there is a lot of difference between this painting and that. However, the main artist stayed even in the covers of books and Qur'ans. You see, this is an artistic cover of a book. And in the Qur'an itself, this is a copy of Book of Kells in Ireland. I think the same art at the same time was also in Europe. It's almost the same design, the same writing, maybe also it contains same informations, but not poetry. This is the Kitab Khana, where the miniature painting was produced. It has the calligrapher, the artist, the man who makes the paint, the man who cuts the paper, the man who makes the paper, the man who joins the paper, the man who gilds the papers, the man who designs the borders, the man who supervised all that, who was called the master. Now we go to India. You see, it has an Indian style of painting. And this is drawn for Shah Jahan by Nادرة Zaman Abu Hassan in 1620. And that's Shah Jahan again with his sons. And this is in Rajasthan, 1781, Maharao Singh hunting. Do you see Maharao Singh?
زراعة جذور
That's Maharao Singh. These are girls from India, the most famous dancers, and they were known for their clothes. They are with fashion. And if you see nowadays, the girls are wearing such clothes. And this is 1830. Her name is Peri Khan Khanji. And this one called Kendar Bakhsh. She's wearing jeans, huh? You see, this is again Indian style painting. And can you focus, Vino? This is selling a donkey. This is again a story, you know, just. This is the duel of the physicians, or the competition of the physicians in the palace. The king, two doctors, one dead, one alive. Now the king chose the good doctor, so they made an agreement. The one who survived became the doctor for the king. This doctor gave this doctor a fruit to eat, which was poison. He survived. He went to the garden, he picked a rose, and he gave it to the second doctor to smell. He smelled it and he died. So that was Again, this is from the Shahnama, Shapur Raftan Batayar. Tayar is two wars, a king called Tayar, an Arab king, and Shapur is the king. And these are looking from the windows of the palace. Sultan Muhammad al-Iraqi has drawn that. These are the original paintings of the books which were translated in early time of the Islamic Empire. Behzad, one of the famous artists, this is his original paintings. Again, this is a social event. Somebody has died and the ladies are wailing and tearing their hair and the men are crying and the mullah is praying. As I told you, it shows so many things. This is one of the famous paintings. It's called the Court of Geomart. Geomart again is a legendary king who was a good king, but he was deceived by a devil which called Ahriman, or the bad spirit, though the angel was advising him against that. This was one of the most famous painting done by Sultan Muhammad al-Iraqi. A king, Khosrow, in a picnic, and his singer sitting beside him, and suddenly this singing appears of nowhere. So the king asks, who's doing that? his artists say, this is the wind singing for me on my behalf. While the real singer was here in the tree, Barbad, who was not allowed to approach the king. So he hid in a bush and he started singing. The king sent people to beat the bush. You see, they're beating the bush, looking for what is coming from the bush there. And they found Barbad, and since then Barbad became the main singer of the court. This is again an Indian style, a feast of two princes. They are going on a picnic and they are cooking for them. As you see, they cook for so many people. Now, the art became European. East India Company has ambassadors in the royal courts, so it becomes sort of a photography more than a miniature art. These are the libraries and the books. I showed you mainly Persian and Indian. This is the Arabian, which is called from Maqamat al-Hariri. Al-Maqam is a story told by a storyteller. Usually it is an invented story for sake of either an advice or a joke or telling a history. And it shows, it has so many maqama written by al-Hariri and told by al-Harith ibn Hammam, and the main personality is Abu Zayd al-Suruji. And maqam is a place where people sit and listen to the storyteller. And this is an Arabian miniature art. It shows the books which were translated and written in one of the houses. And if you notice the arrangement, funny enough, they call this the Muslim arrangement of books. They don't stand them, they lie them flat. They are, the story of Maqamat al-Hariri is mainly on begging, or how you get money by fooling the people. And there is Maqam al-Baghdadiyya, al-Rahbiyya, al-San'a'iyya, al-Furatiyya, and so on. Now, I tried through this talk to attract your attention to a piece of material like that sold in the market for 10 dinars. What is behind it? What's the origin? How it was produced? By whom? And how much we can learn from these artistic paintings. Thank you very much. Ready for questions? Have any? Yes, please.
About Muhammad.
Yes.
Is there a relation with Iraq singer now? They call it Muhammad.
Maqam in Arabic, classic Arabic, means a place where people sit to listen, either to a singer or a storyteller. At the same time, maqam in music in Arabic is a level of music and style of music, like al-maqam al-Baghdadi, al-maqam al-Bayati, maqam al-Ras, maqam al-Ajam, okay, maqam al-Do, maqam al-Do al-Kabir, and so on. They tell you what is the maqam. This means when they tell you, please play for me maqam al-Ras, then you know which finger you are going to play on the lute. Or maqam Ajam Ashiran. So you know what is, okay, so this is name of a place and name of style of art. Please. No, the ivory art is mainly Far Eastern India, but this miniature art paintings is Persian, Turkish, and Mughal. And even in the Mughal court, it was written in Persian because that was the language of the Mughal court.
Many of the faces of the miniature look Chinese. Is that because it's Mughal?
Most of them that you see is from the Mughal manuscripts. No, the manuscript. There are Persian ones, and there are, if you notice, the Baghdadi one is Arab feature. Okay, that's Yahya al-Wasiti school in Baghdad. This one is a Persian, in fact, but the Mughal one has a Mughal feature because they were drawn from real personalities. They have names and everything, you know. Abdullah.
Dr. Amin, these miniatures, I think, were only confined into artistic things, poetry, but I could see that for example, in history books, in other philosophical books, they were not appearing. Am I correct?
When Arabs started translating books from the Byzantine Empire, they transferred the picture as well. But it was not a human picture. It was vegetations, flowers, and animals. Now, when Ibn al-Muqaffa did that from Hindu to Persian to Arabic, to Farsi to Arabic, he was condemned because of the paintings in his books, that he is an infidel. In fact, they said he is Majusi. Yes, he was not killed. They made an oven in the house of the governor of Al-Basra, and they brought him. So they sentenced him to death. And they brought knives and they started cutting him small by small pieces and throwing them in the fire. Yes. Yes. Because Ibn al-Muqaffa not only was a storyteller and writer, he was also a court writer. And he used to write them official documents and letters. Al-Mahdi has a grudge against some minister. The minister asked Ibn al-Muqaffa to write a document that al-Mahdi would sign, saying that if I cross what I said, I divorce all my wives. Ibn al-Muqaffa wrote it in such a style that al-Mahdi was obliged to sign it, but was very angry with Ibn al-Muqaffa. And he asked the Al-Basra governor to catch him and kill him. Please.
كأنك أنت ذكرت محمود غزني ومو محمود غزني.
غزنوي of Ghazna. Yeah. No, Mahmoud of Ghazna.
غزنوي.
Yes, of Ghazna. Of Ghazna.
بعدين ذكرنا المنمنمات أنا نشوف في خلط عند المثقفين العرب في استخدام كلمة المنمنمات. التفسير اللي بتاعت الليلة يختلف في استخدامات كثير المذكرين لاحظت فهناك يبدو في خلط في استخدام معنى المنمنمات.
المنمنمة هي المخطوطة المصورة، هذه معناه منمنمة بس. ونمنم الشيء زين الشيء. نمنم هو ما تتركه الريح على التراب من آثاره، هذه معنى نمنم.
يعني يقول لك منمنمات صباحية.
لا
هو يستخدم كلمة شيء خفيف.
تفضل سعد سفير. المخطوطة المصورة. نعم. اللي لها ستايل معين، ديزاين معين، اللي هي مثل هذه، لها حاشية، لها موضوع، لها حاشية، لها رسوم بأبعاد ثلاثة، ولها معنى. تفضل. Yes. خسرو and شيرين.
خسرو and شيرين.
Yes.
Who started the first love? Khosrow loved Shireen or
Shireen was in Armenia. Shireen was a princess in Armenia. A friend of Khosrow go to Armenia and he takes a painting of Khosrow with him. And he puts it on a tree. And Shireen passing by, she see the picture. He goes again, he put it in another tree. Shireen sees it again, and she falls in love with the picture. That's how Shireen fell in love with Khosrow. But Shireen and Farhad is different story altogether. Yes.
Does Shireen has a meaning? The word Shireen?
Sweet. Yes, sir.
Like on this presentation, I read a lot about Tony Buzan, and I think that the Arab who started this translating their thought by using literature, but the West believe that Tony Buzan introduced this principle. Who do you believe is Tony Buzan?
I'll tell you the truth. I think art, okay, sculpture, poetry, belong to all humanity. It doesn't belong to certain people. Never say it's man. Somewhere, somehow he started it. You see, you should cross these borders of being, this is only we started it and nobody else has the right. It's not the right thing to say. Each one of those produced by several people of different origins, of different belief, but they were all together for one thing, an artistic production, and they produced it. If you read the names of the people who established the Arabian Muslim library in Baghdad, Al-Ma'mun and Al-Mansur and Harun al-Rashid time, none of them was Arab. I'll be honest with you, none of them was Arab. They were either Copt, Syrian, Hindu, Persian, but they converted to Islam, they spoke Arabic. And that's how they were able to translate. And nobody said that it was Persian or Hindu. They said it was an Islamic art, an Islamic calligraphy, an Islamic architect, an Islamic manuscripts, and so on. So I cannot go back now and divide and say, no, that was an Arab, it wasn't a...
So that you believe that the Muslims will use this principle of using arts to...
All what I can say, photography or printing a face was not accepted in the Islamic Empire, because when they came in contact with the Byzantine Empire, they were icons and people were worshipping the icons, and they were afraid that those pictures will change into icons, that people will pray instead of unified soul to God, they will pray through a picture or sculpture or anything else, and that was forbidden. However, paintings in Syria and the old palaces in the Umayyad period, it belonged to the Byzantines and not to the Umayyad people. Okay.
One more question regarding from the beginning you mentioned that you are not an artist.
No, I'm not.
To speak about the artist. But I want to ask, do you have any idea about the kind of this paint?
Natural paint, like the Persian carpet. They were lapis lazuli, silver, gold, lead, grass. And in fact, they had formulas which are very secret to the master only. He is the only one who mixed the paint and nobody else. And it was an art that they had to learn. As I said earlier, Shah Tahmasab had to learn how to mix his paint. It's all natural paint. And it is not oil, and it was not done on cloth. It was done either on direct wall or paper. Okay?
You might thank the doctor.
Thank you.